Okay, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to my cinema lecture. This is the intro to Cinematography 1. We're here at UCF and this is part of my online content. I'm going to start this over. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Cinematography 1. I'm your professor, Michael Walsh, and this is the introductory lecture to Cinematography 1. We're here at UCF today, and I want to go through the basics of the curriculum for Cinematography 1. I want to welcome you to the program. If you haven't taken any other film classes at this point, this will be one of several of your core required courses that you'll be taking here at UCF for either the Bachelor of Fine Arts or the Bachelor of Arts degree here in film. This is an online lecture. It's part of the architecture of my classes. All of my classes will have internet content, and all of the materials relevant to the class and to each week's coursework will have their appropriate pages on Webcourses, and you can access this information at any time throughout the semester, and you can keep abreast of the information and the coursework. Even if you happen to miss a face-to-face lecture, you can join me here online. You can check out the lectures in virtual space. You can access the PDFs of the decks, the videos for review, and any of the downloadable PDFs that I provide for you throughout the course of the semester. You can also access your homework assignments. You'll take all of your quizzes and your final exam online here on Webcourses. And you can track your performance as well. You can also reach out to me via email. I'm listed, if you go to the People tab in Webcourses for this class and scroll down to the W's, you'll find my name listed as the instructor for this course, and there is some navigation there where you can actually send me a message through the system, or you can access me through the announcements page or the discussions pages throughout the set of modules and throughout the coursework on Webcourses. Okay, so let's get started. This is week 1, and I realize that as an intro class, some of you may elect to take cinematography at a later date. Some of you may, for whatever reason, elect to postpone taking this core required class at this time, or for the individuals who have not yet shown up, I don't want to get too far into the core concepts of the class until I'm sure that I have everybody here in the proper cohort to move forward. So today is going to be a discussion about the introduction to the concept of cinematography. I want to talk about a few broad topics, and I want to go a little bit through the syllabus and the course outline so you have some idea of what to expect moving forward. So I put this little quote down here on the opening tableau of the deck, and it's from Jean-Luc Godard. He was a major player in the French New Wave in Europe in the 60s and 70s, and his opinion to this thing is that cinema is the most beautiful fraud in the world. In other words, everything is contrived. These are stories. Much of it isn't true. It's interpretive, it's metaphorical, it's many, many things, but it is not necessarily representative of reality. However, we do strive in many or most cases to have our content look and feel as realistic as possible, and perhaps even transcend those barriers of our initial realities or our initial awareness or spatial awareness, and transcend the boundaries of the camera and the audience and get into these stories in an immersive quality from an immersive point of view. So there's a lot of exciting ways to look at cinematography. I think it's more than simply taking a camera and pointing it at something and hoping that the images look pretty enough to compel your audience to watch. I think everything about cinematography is deliberate. It is an art form for sure. So there are processes, there are methods that we can follow. We have style that we can develop and evolve over time. We have our tastes, our preferences in terms of composition and arrangements and the visual presentations of our films. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about. I'm very excited about the topic myself. I spent a number of years doing it in Hollywood, in Los Angeles. I spent the lion's share of my career as a chief lighting technician. So I come from a lighting background, and then when you combine my lighting sensibilities with my understanding of cameras and my appreciation for lenses and composition and so forth, I think that is at the essence of a nice blend of what we call cinematography. Very interpretive, very subjective, and each one of us, if we're so inclined, has a style that is working with our preferences and our sensibilities to create a visual language that we're offering to our audiences in hopes to entertain, inform, or inspire. So let's start looking into this topic a little more deeply. This is Cinematography 1. This is 2461C. Now there are some date references on this set of slides. Don't worry about that. Webcourses is always updated with the most up-to-date due dates and date references that you need to be aware of as part of whatever class you're in moving forward. This lecture will be used by a number of different sections. So it's the topics that we're following here. It's the presentation, the information, and the access to the supplemental materials that is most important here. So I encourage you to apply your and focus your attention in those directions. Okay. For this class, for this semester, we're talking about spring 2020. These are the relevant dates for your quizzes. You have quiz 1 beginning on Monday, the 20th of January. Again, that's online. All of your testing will be online. Every couple of weeks, you're going to have a quiz that will be focused on the previous two to 3 weeks of instruction. They're generally very fundamental quizzes. I don't believe in trick questions. I don't believe in misleading questions or questions that require a great deal of interpretation or research. The fundamental reasoning behind my quizzes is merely to find out and get some kind of a gauge as to whether or not you're paying attention, you're absorbing the information, that you're understanding the concepts on a fundamental level, and then I rely on you and your responsibility to reach out to me if you have any trouble at any point understanding the information or the concepts that are being presented to you. I'm very happy to work with you on a personal one-to-one basis. We can have face-to-face meetings at my office, or we can have Skype meetings, or we can have email exchanges, phone conversations. There's a number of ways that you can reach out to me. I'm very passionate about cinematography, and it would be my goal that it becomes a functional part of your filmmaking repertoire, that you can use these skills, apply these concepts, and make your work exponentially better. Okay? That's at the root of what we're after here, and I hope that you approach these topics with an open mind. If it's the first time you're hearing some of these things, don't worry. Just take it all in, let it marinate. I like to say let it marinate for a while. At some point, what I'm striving for are the little aha moments that you'll experience throughout the semester, perhaps beyond this semester, okay? There may be some concepts that are very new to you. You'll hear them here for the first time. You'll take a basic awareness of those concepts away with you, and maybe next semester or next year or in the midst of a project that you're doing, you'll go, oh my gosh, that's what that was all about. That's what he meant when he said this and that, and I understand now. Wow, water relief, and so forth. So if it doesn't register with you right away, that's okay. We're going to talk about a lot of these concepts cyclically. I'm going to mention terms more than once. I'm going to talk about themes more than once, talk about techniques more than once. And throughout the semester, you're going to see how all the different modalities or concepts that I'm presenting to you can be looked at in a variety of ways relevant to what part of the process you're involved in, and that eventually you'll have looked at each of these concepts 2 or 3 different ways, and eventually it will sink in. I promise you it will make sense. A few things that I want to bring to your attention, and one of those is a really important tool that you have here at UCF. It's called the Operational Portal. You can access this online. You don't have to go to UCF home website or anything to access the portal. You can do that straight through Google. Okay, it's just the operationalportal.com. But basically what it is it's the official website of the film department operations and equipment office here for the film program. So there's quite a bit of navigation here that leads you to a lot of information. There's a lot of information that is constantly changing, like events that are being publicized here. There are surveys, there are equipment lists, there are sign-up sheets, there's a number of different pieces of information that you can access through the portal. This is a tool. It's a tool for you to use as a student of the film program throughout your experience at UCF, okay? So I encourage you to go in and just sort of poke around and take a look. Access some of this navigation and see where it leads you, and take a look at the information that is contained there. It can be very helpful to you. It's a resource. Just use it. It's one of a number of resources you have at your disposal. And make as much use of it as you can. The more you get, the more you put into this experience here in the film program, the more you're going to get out of it. Okay, so and it starts with stuff like this. So this is the introduction to cinematography. This is Cinematography 1. This is our premier class. Okay, and I want to show you a few things, like for instance, you can access one of the editions of the required textbook for this course, and it's available online at the UCF library. The current edition of the required text is available here at the UCF bookstore. Okay, we're going to use Cinematography Theory and Practice by Blaine Brown. The second edition has a brown cover. The third edition has a blue cover. So I affectionately refer to those 2 different volumes as the brown book and the blue brown book. And I'm going to assign reading assignments from either of those 2 volumes. I usually strive to assign out of the brown book first, because that's the one that most people have the most access to. You can download a PDF of that text from the UCF library, so that information in that edition is more readily available. And as long as the information hasn't changed too much from the second edition to the third edition, I'm totally fine with you guys accessing and using the brown version for some of your reading assignments. Now, some reading assignments will have to come out of the third edition, the blue cover, because it's updated information, or it's information that doesn't exist in the second edition. In those cases, you will be asked to access somehow, either by purchase, rent, or by digital edition, access that information to do your reading assignments. Okay? I'll talk to you a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. The first though, I want to sort of introduce myself. Okay? My name is Mike. I'm a retired chief lighting technician from the International Alliance of Theatrical and Studio Employees. Okay, that's the IATSE. My local number at the time of my retirement was 728, which is the Motion Picture Lamp Operators Union in Los Angeles. And that's odd. I lost my my monitor here. Let's pause. restart the recording here. Okay, well, I'm back. I lost my onboard monitor, so we've installed a new battery on that, and we're ready to resume recording here. So I want to pick up where I left off with my bio, okay? So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Mike. I'm a retired chief lighting technician from Los Angeles. My career has spanned 3 decades. I started working in the film industry in the fall of 1988, and I sort of semi-retired, sort of unofficially retired in 2018. And so I have 30 years in motion pictures, predominantly in feature film and broadcast television, although I have also shot content for new media and web broadcasts, worked on music videos and commercials as well. So my bio as such explains my credits. I'll show you my IMDb page, my Internet Movie Database page in a moment. Basically, I worked my way up through the ranks of the grip department, the lighting department, and the camera department. I started my career as a young camera assistant, around the age you guys are at now, maybe a little bit younger. I was a loader. In those days, the industry was film-based. That was our fundamental capture medium. So I was a loader and a second assistant cameraman. I did that for a few years and then migrated out of the camera department. I wanted to learn dolly mechanics, crane mechanics, and ultimately lighting. That's always been my passion. I've been have a deep-rooted concern and aspiration towards cinematic lighting. I'm very inspired by it and many of my contemporaries who inspire me in my own work. I ended my career as a cinematographer for my own production company in Los Angeles, shooting industrials, shooting commercials, and shooting web-based content for my own boutique production company called Mind Made Media. So I've got a fairly well-rounded body of experience that spans grip, lighting, and camera departments, and 30 years of active participation in the field. In 2008, we won 2 bronze tellies through Mind Made Media. One was for excellence in cinematography, yours truly, and for excellence in producing and public relations. Me and my partner were very proud of those accomplishments. We also produced a documentary which I shot and directed in 2008. Well, from 2006 to 2008. We released it in 2009. It premiered at the Napa Sonoma Wine Country Film Festival, where we won Best Eco Documentary that year for a film titled Leap of Faith, from the fast lane to the farmstead. So that's kind of my background. I began teaching about 10 years ago. I find the experience very rewarding. I'm very interested in meeting the next generation of film enthusiasts, professionals, and aspiring creatives, and helping to guide your development and help to nurture and inspire you to get out there and be a part of this amazing career, which is like no other thing you'll do in your life. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Writing and Rhetoric, which I actually fulfilled after my retirement. So in 1986, I entered film school, had some issues and some problems that required me to drop out of college. I went to work right away in the industry, and as soon as I got out, one of the first things that I was compelled to do was to go back to college and finish my education. I had enough experience in filmmaking that I figured that was probably not the best use of my time at that point, and so I looked for some experience that I hadn't acquired any other way, and 30 years in the film industry working lighting and camera and grip, being behind the camera, helping expedite someone else's ideas and help someone else's script get realized. It kind of showed me that there was a part of the industry that I hadn't experienced and that I might find particularly compelling, and that was the writing side of things. So when I came back to college, the first thing that I did was approach my my alma mater for any usable credits that I could apply to a new degree. We fabricated from the remnants of my prior experience a couple of years worth of usable credit, and I applied those towards a writing and rhetoric degree, which I was very proud of, and feel very proud of that accomplishment. It expanded my creativity. It helped reconcile a number of things that I had kind of always known about cinematography and images, and how these things are an unspoken language all of their own, and that they can convey meaning, and they can elicit emotion and inspiration and responses from an audience. And so filmmaking, if you think about it, is a language unto itself, and it has style, it has dialect, it has a lot of the same things that we can find comparably in the written discipline. So for me, learning the craft of writing seemed to be maybe the next phase of my evolution in terms of storytelling. So I have a BA in writing and rhetoric, and I'm currently pursuing my master's degree. I'm almost done. My master's degree in creative writing, focusing on script writing for features, television, and new media. So it's been a long process for me. I'm 52 years old. Like I said, I have 30 years of experience in the field, and I've taken on the responsibility of teaching as part of my growth process and part of a way to fulfill an oath that I took when I joined the union so many years ago as a young man, in which I promised if I took the information and the guidance that was going to be given to me by my mentors, by my my superiors and my teachers, that someday when I would come to the point where I was ready to sort of step back from the field of competition and teach, that I would pass on what I had learned, and that I would share and pass on all of the wonderful skills, knowledge, and experience that had been given and nurtured unto me by my brothers in the union. So that's why I'm here today. Like I said, it's an evolution, okay? Working in the field is a young man's game, and a series of injuries that required operations and hospitalization are the things that kind of sidelined my career from working behind the camera. And so teaching is how I can stay connected to my craft. I can give back to the filmmaking community by helping young folks find their way, find their path in the incredible career of filmmaking. I can still contribute. I can continue to contribute. So those are the reasons that have landed me here. This is who I am. I am your instructor. I want to share all of this knowledge and experience with you. I'm trying to distill down a very long career into a very short time that we have together. So I hope that you'll bear with me. I hope that I can maybe shed a little light on some of these concepts, inspire you a little bit, tell you some interesting stories maybe from behind the scenes, and create some community here inside the film program. So that's my objective, and I hope that you see it the same way. If you want to see the totality of my my professional studio career, you can go to imdb.com, and you can go to my website, my page, and access my body of work. So I'm Michael J. Walsh, and I'm the first designation Michael J. Walsh because my my list goes back to about 1990. So this is my career. And some stuff you might notice. So you might notice Tears of the Sun. You might notice Basic, John Travolta and Sam Jackson, Into the Blue. The last major feature film that I worked on was Angels and Demons. That was with Tom Hanks and Ron Howard and Sal Totino. Drag Me to Hell, Eagle Eye. And the list goes on. If you check out my page and take a look at what I've done, it's all fairly in good order and accurate here. Every once in a while I pop in and I take a look at it and make sure that there's nothing that's inconsistent or inaccurate. So, you know, this is all pretty much, this is pretty much what I've done over the last 30 years of my career. So you might recognize some of these titles. Some of these films might be on your list of faves. I hope so. It's been a very rewarding career for me. I wouldn't change a thing. I enjoy making movies. I enjoy the small ones as much as the big budget ones. Okay, it's all kind of the same process for me. It's a rewarding career. It has a lot of camaraderie. It has a lot of really great aspects and features that not a lot of careers can offer, particularly a young man, and particularly a young man who at the time had dropped out of college and had to go to work. So it's been a very productive and supportive part of my life, and so I would love to share the best aspects of it with you. Okay. Moving forward here, I want to introduce you to somebody who I've worked with in the past, who I feel very warmly towards. This is Nancy Shriver, ASC. I want to add that to her introduction here because that's a very important distinction. The ASC is the American Society of Cinematographers. It's a guild. It's not a labor union. It's a guild that you become a member of by virtue of being invited. Okay. So Nancy, who started her career as a young woman in New York City working on sets as a PA, and then became what we call an electrician in the industry, although she wasn't going out and installing devices in your home or running cable in the attic or installing your telephones and cable TV. She was a motion picture electrician, which is more about portable power systems, generators, lighting equipment, and all of the sort of material and incidental equipment that we need to work on location creating films. And she started in the electric department, became a chief lighting technician like I was, and then transitioned in to the camera department, and then ascended the ranks of the camera department to become a cinematographer. She is significant for a lot of reasons, and the primary reason that I mention Nancy, not only is she a wonderful person, but I mention Nancy specifically because I want the young women in this class and the young women in this film program to understand that this is not a boys' club, not anymore. You might have been able to make that argument years ago, but in recent years, this has become a much more complex and a much more integrated career. And the young women who are a part of it have had maybe not as many opportunities, but the opportunities grow every year and they get more plentiful every year. And I use Nancy as a shining example of the notion that because you are female does not mean that you cannot succeed in the industry to the highest levels that are available and possible. Okay, Nancy did it, and you might be the next ASC cinematographer, one of the young ladies in the audience today. You might be one of the next cinematographers that works at a very high level. Okay, there's a number of them that are active in the industry these days. They're turning out some amazing work. Okay, and so the conversation may feel like I'm talking only to the guys sometimes because I'll use the pronouns guys and the men, or you know, understand that those are merely terms that I have to grow out of using, and I have to start seeking more universal pronouns that will really refer to everyone. So it's really sort of just a natural slip of the tongue and an honest misinterpretation that I don't want you to in any way misconstrue for anything other than everybody has an equal stake and is equally accessible to these careers and has an equal shot at success. Okay, some of the finest technicians that I've worked with over the years have been women, so I don't want to misrepresent myself in any way and say that this is, if you're not a strong, healthy young man, that you're not going to be able to succeed at this career, because that would be patently untrue. And I want to quash any sort of misunderstanding or rumor to that end right here and now. Okay, and Nancy is one of many shining examples of what is possible. Okay. I have a couple of films here that in a face-to-face session I would normally project them up on a larger screen. I don't know if this aspect ratio and size are going to do some of these videos justice. So what I'll do is refer you to the video content on Webcourses. If you go to the Webcourses platform, okay, your home page is just sort of like a menu, okay, but if you go to the modules page, and you can access it, say, down here, it'll look pretty much like the home page. This is the introduction right here. If you click on the introduction page, it's going to show you the reference image from the slide presentation, and then it's going to have all of the videos that are embedded in the lecture presentation are also embedded here in Webcourses on the introduction module page. Okay, so you can go to this page, and you'll notice that I have queued up at the moment Being a Cinematographer in HD 1280 by 720 MP4. You can go and access that same title here on Webcourses, Being a Cinematographer, and simply push the play icon, and the screen's going to come up, and it's going to show you the video full screen, and then you can watch it on whatever device you're most comfortable with. Now, I have tried to manufacture the Webcourses experience for this class to function on a variety of devices. I have tested the course on a cell phone and on a tablet and on a laptop, and the navigation all seems to work fine across all those devices. The presentation might be slightly different, for instance, from the cell phone to the tablet or from the cell phone to the laptop. The cell phone has a tendency to stack things in longer scrolling lines, but it all fits. There's no information that has been eliminated or cropped out in any way. But if you do experience any difficulty accessing Webcourses and the content contained there on your specific device, please let me know. Either send me an email, approach me after class, come to my office during office hours, bring the problem to my attention, and we'll see what we can do to solve it for you, okay? So in the case of these next three videos, Being a Cinematographer, and what makes a cinematic image, and what's the role of the cinematographer, and light and shadow, I'm going to refer you to Webcourses and the embedded content. You can watch those videos at your leisure when you get home today or in your spare time. Each one of these videos, I'll just mention, Being a Cinematographer is kind of a it's kind of a metaphorical or lyrical statement about the craft of cinematography and who the cinematographer is, what their thought process is, what kind of an individual are they, how do they see the world. The video on what makes a cinematic image is an important question that I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 times this semester in earnest, okay? I'm mentioning it today in the introduction because I want you to be thinking about your answer to this question. What makes a cinematic image? Okay? In your financial aid assignment, I'm asking you for a couple of written paragraphs on your opinion of what a cinematic image is or what your perception of Hollywood is, okay? Because I want to kind of start getting into your mind a little bit and find out what your goals are, what you're trying to get out of these courses. And hopefully I can present the information to you or give you additional sources of outside information that you can gather to help you with your understanding and your experience in the film program, okay? I want to know what film means to you, okay? I know what it means to me, and I'm going to give you my opinion of it throughout the semester. What I want is an exchange of ideas, so I want to know what you think filmmaking is, what you think makes an image cinematic, and then in this class we're going to deconstruct that theory and see, you know, how it sorts out, okay? The film that is asking what is the role of the cinematographer, this is where an individual has gone to an event, might have been NAB, might have been CineGear, and the interviewer is asking a number of notable cinematographers who have verifiable resumes what they think their role is in the filmmaking process. And you're going to find that as many cinematographers as you can find and ask that question or pose that question to, you'll get that many responses in return, okay? Everybody kind of has their own take on what this thing is, okay? And your opinion of it is equally as valid as far as your career and your body of work go to support your point of view, okay? So start thinking now about what your feelings are about this process. How do you feel about cinematography? How can you use it? How can you apply it to your own work to further compel and inspire your audience? Okay. This film here, Light and Shadow, this is a documentary. It's a little over an hour long, I believe, and it's simply a narrative about some of the notable termed greatest cinematographers throughout the world, okay? And so there's a number of people that are mentioned in this documentary. Some names you may recognize, some names may be new to you, the content may be new to you, or it may be something that you recognize and you just didn't know who to attribute the creation of that content to. Or toward. So this is an interesting documentary that I encourage you to watch on your own time. It's very light. It's easy to watch. It's not asking you to do too much mental work. It'll show you some very beautiful images, and hopefully it'll give you some ideas, if nothing else. Okay, so I want to take a quick look at the outline of the course. It's 3 or 4 pages long, and listed here are some of the topics that I want to cover with you. So today we're in the introduction, and today this is just welcome to the class. This is me, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to try and offer you, show you how Webcourses works, show you the concepts we're going to cover in the class, give you an overview of the camera department as an entity on a set. We'll talk a little bit about the course objectives. I'm going to show you some parts of the syllabus, and I'm going to show you where you can access the videos and become inspired, okay? Section 1 in this class is about camera basics, and I'm going to talk about what the camera is as a mechanism, as a tool, okay? I'm going to show you a few different variations. I'm going to talk about some concepts that are camera-centric, like recording formats, recording media. I'm going to introduce you to terms like bit rate, color depth, and gamma, okay? We're going to talk about aspect ratio. In other words, what's the length and the height of the image that we're looking at. In this case, the frame that you're looking at here, I have crafted out in 1920 by 1080 full HD in a 16:9 aspect ratio. By the end of this semester, you're going to know exactly what that means, okay? I'm going to talk about compression. I'm going to talk about capture devices. That means the chip inside your camera. What is it? How does it work? What is its role in the chain of image creation, both digitally and maybe through analog? I'm going to talk to you about documents and paperwork consistent with the camera department. I'm going to talk to you about building the camera as a device that's functional for you on set. So lenses, external monitors, viewfinders, different types of cameras by brand and by specs and capability, and we're going to talk about the differences of some of these devices. I'm going to talk to you about tripods. I'm going to talk to you about frame rates and talk to you about a little bit about audio, but quite frankly, it's not my wheelhouse. I worked for 30 years in the industry and never once picked up a piece of audio equipment. I've been a member of labor unions that will compartmentalize all these different disciplines and specialties, and so I'm not an audio guy, never have been and never will be. And you have some really great teachers here on campus that are going to give you a complete fundamental education in audio recording and location capture. And so I'm going to leave that responsibility up to them. I'm going to touch on it here and there simply as a complementary aspect of cinematography in some fashion that's non-specific and non-technical, and I won't hold you responsible for audio concepts in cinematography class. That's the purview of your audio instructors. Section 2 is going to be all about exposure. How is exposure calculated? How is it created? What's the difference between a good exposure and a bad exposure? How do we control the camera in a way that affects exposure? And so forth, all the variables involved and how to mix and match those variables in a variety of combinations to achieve specific image results. Okay. Section 2B, part and parcel with exposure, we're going to have a conversation about filtration, because filtration can be an integral part of exposure depending on what filters we're talking about. So we're going to talk about different types of filters, different types of connectivity of filters to cameras, so screw-in filters, cut glass filters, resin filters. We're going to talk about matte boxes, the devices that can load filters in front of our cinema camera and cinema lenses. We're going to talk about a few specific filters, polarizers, diffusion filters, neutral density filters, optical flats, close-up diopters, low-con filters, color correction filters, and so forth. Section 3 of the course is about lighting. The first half of Section 3 is about the three-point lighting approach to rendering three-dimensional objects in a two-dimensional medium. Okay, so the screen on your TV, the screen in the theater has length and width, but it's flat, and those environments exist virtually on the surface. How do we take a three-dimensional subject that's standing in three-dimensional space and light them in a way that gives them depth, tone, texture, and exposure, and do that deliberately and consistently in a way that renders our subjects suitably for the story, creatively for their visual appeal, and also emotionally. How do we light our scenes, our situations, and our characters in a way that can appeal emotionally to our audience? Okay, and then the second half of Section 3 will be primarily a lighting demonstration, where I'm going to bring you into the lab. This is the stage, by the way. And I'm going to bring you in here, and we're going to have an introduction to lighting fixtures. I'm going to talk to you about the different styles of lighting fixtures that we have in our lighting arsenal. I'm going to talk to you about hardness and softness of sources. I'm going to talk to you about the color of sources and how we can balance all those things, affect all those things, and manipulate all those things with diffusion, color, and so forth, modifiers and so forth. And then I'm going to have a discussion about specific brands of instrument, and we're going to talk a little bit about the new technology of LEDs and what's happening in the future of lighting, and what direction we're moving in terms of our cinematic lighting moving forward into the future. And I've got a few very nice videos to show you along those lines. In Section 4 of the course, this is where we're going to have a discussion about composition. We're going to talk about elements of composition. We're going to talk about specific techniques like framing. We're going to talk about the director's line to the 180-degree rule. We're going to talk about shooting for the edit. We're going to talk about lenses in terms of their rendering characteristics. We're going to talk about the types of shots that we're going to use to assemble and edit. We're going to talk about point of view, objective versus subjective filmmaking. We're going to talk about low-key and high-key lighting situations. We're going to talk about bokeh, what it is, what that refers to, and what that does for our images. We're going to talk about compositional techniques like the rule of thirds, the quadrant rule, and the golden ratio. We'll also talk about repetition and pattern, line and convergence, and then we'll talk a little bit about color and black and white, and a little bit about lookup tables. In section 5 of the course, we're going to talk about shot design. Okay, so we're going to take all of our elements of composition, we're going to apply those deliberately to specific frames and working functional pieces of coverage that we can assemble in a nonlinear editing system and look at the way they flow and how they are compatible, how they're complementary to one another, and how we can create the world of interpersonal communication between characters, conflict, how we can portray messaging and narrative through framing and lens work. We're going to talk about designing sequences and how they all go together. Basically, a conversation that is sort of the flip side of what you would have in your intro to editing class, which is the mechanics of assembling pieces of film together into a linear narrative. Okay, we're going to talk about what those shots need to be and how they can be crafted. Okay. Then, towards the end of the semester in section 6, I'm going to talk to you about camera movement. And camera movement is a topic that's very close to my heart because I think that lighting and camera movement are the two distinct characteristics of the cinematic art form that make it unique. Okay? You don't have camera movement in still photography. You can simulate motion and apply motion in a number of ways, but you don't have the revelation of a new frame from a pre-existing frame in real time. That only happens in cinema, okay, or the variations of cinema. So that includes video and, broadcast media, okay. How do our motion pictures now, how do they reflect an art form in and of themselves, okay? So that's the semester in a nutshell. That's what we're going after. I know it sounds like a lot of stuff to cover, but it moves pretty quickly. I don't drill too deeply into these concepts because this is only Cinematography 1. There is, this is a core required course for your basic BA or your BFA degree. There is a Cinematography 2 that I also teach. That is an elective course. Okay, this course has a larger cohort, anywhere from 40 to 60 students per section. Cinematography 2, however, is an elective, and it is an exclusive elective. It only has 25. There is a class cutoff of 25 seats. Okay, so if you think that cinematography is something you want to move into in the future, if you're interested in it deeply, if it motivates you more than some of the other disciplines and you want to have more information, I would highly recommend Cinematography 2. It is an elective. It's typically offered in the fall, and then cinematography is offered in the fall, spring, and summer sessions. So Cinematography 2 is a little harder to get a hold of. There's fewer seats. So the sooner you know that it's something you want to participate in, the sooner you should start asking how to enroll. Okay. Now there's a few basic rules for this class. The academics of this course, it's pretty simple, okay? I have the financial aid assignment in the beginning of the semester. I give you 6 quizzes throughout the 13 or 14 weeks that we're together. Okay, so roughly every 2 weeks you're going to have a quiz. It's usually 20 to 25 questions, and it's typically a half an hour for you to complete the quiz. It is timed, so you don't want to dawdle. It's timed and designed that way so that I can have some kind of ethical control over folks that might be compelled to want to look up all their answers. It's not really an open book quizzing situation. I realize that sometimes, even in the real world, we've got to access information to gain answers to questions that we ask on set. But as a rule, I'm trying to gauge what you're able to retain and what makes sense to you and what you're having trouble with. And the quizzes, therefore, are one of the few metrics that I have to apply to this course and figure out if I'm reaching you or not. So I have to insist that you study for the quizzes and take your best shot at them without accessing one or two answers with your notes or the textbooks that I ask you to obtain. That's not unreasonable, but I certainly don't want you to sit there and try to look up every answer to every quiz. So they're timed to prevent that from happening. Your final exam is a cumulative exam, and I take the questions from all the different quiz banks that I have created for the quizzes throughout the semester. Sometimes a question can end up on the final that you haven't seen in a quiz. Okay, that's because I'm working from question banks, not from limited sets of predetermined numbers of questions. So the idea is study the concepts and take good notes in class so that the concept is functional in your own knowledge and experience, and that you're not simply memorizing questions and answers. Okay, you'll have a participation grade, which is really just your attendance grade. Okay, now I put all the content for these classes on the internet, so if you can't meet in person on a particular week, life happens, I understand. You can go to Webcourses, you can watch these lectures, you can access the PDF of the decks I use from the lectures, you can access the videos, you can download any of the PDFs that I mentioned in the lecture, and you can access your quizzes. All your quizzes and testing will be done online anyway. So you can fully participate in this class and only lose points if you don't show up for any of the lectures. Okay, so if you just show up for the lectures, take notes, take the information with an open mind, let it sink in. I give very few assignments. I'm not listing them on here because they change from semester to semester based on events that might affect our schedule and so forth, and also based on my rate of success with the class. If I have a really good class that's on the ball and all these concepts seem to be going in, sinking in, and making perfect sense, I might ask you guys to do more complex assignments than I might of other classes from other semesters where I may have some folks that need a little extra time with things like exposure, for instance, and I'll spend extra time with that, and so my assignments will be more gauged towards that type of information. So I average about 2 to 3 outside assignments in a semester, but predominantly your homework consists of reading, either reading from the textbook, reading from a PDF that I provide to you, or reading from another source that I also provide to you. Okay, so the only document you're required to obtain for this class is your textbook. If you get the Brown version of the Brown book, that's the second edition, you can download the PDF from the UCF library. Just understand that there's a few chapters, I think there's 2 or 3 chapters in the third edition, the blue version, that aren't in the Brown version of the Brown book, okay? So that's the risk you're going to take. If you only get the second edition, you're going to be missing some information, okay? If you get the blue Brown book, you can get that online at Amazon. The prices average anywhere from $30 to $50, okay? And since it's a document that you need for your education and that you can use in your career, it does qualify, and you'll learn about these things as you move forward. I talk about this in my intro class all the time. The way you do your taxes as an independent filmmaker, you have certain things that you can deduct from your overall income as bona fide expenses towards your career, and a professional library is one of those bona fide deductions you can take on your tax return every year. So if you have to buy a textbook, if you have to buy a manual, if you have to buy any kind of printed document, this also includes, believe it or not, magazine subscriptions to industry periodicals like American Cinematographer or Independent Filmmaker Magazine or HD Video Pro. You can deduct those subscriptions from your taxes as well. So it's a good idea, if it's within your means financially to do so, to pick up the most recent version of the textbook so you have the most up-to-date information on the topics we're covering in class. Okay, now let's get to some of the governing rules. It's very simple. Due dates are hard deadlines, and the reason why is because the industry is running on hard deadlines, okay? If you're working on a TV series and you have an air date every week, you got to make Thursday at 8 p.m. with your next episode, you can't be late. You can't turn that work in the day after. You can't turn it in on Friday when your broadcast window was Thursday at 7 p.m. or Thursday at 8 p.m., okay? The work has to be done. It has to be done on time because there are other people in other aspects of the business who rely on you doing your thing when you're supposed to, so that they can do their thing when they're required, okay? So you might as well get used to that now. Due dates for quizzes and any assignments that I issue are hard due dates and hard deadlines, okay? Every semester, I'll get at least 2 or 3 people out of 100 students that will send me an email that says, Professor Walsh, I'm so sorry. I fell asleep. I was going to take a nap and then get up and study and take my quiz, and I slept through my alarm, and I got up, and the quiz was over, and the window was closed, and can you reopen the quiz so I can take it? No, I cannot, okay? Your job right now is to be in school and take these classes, okay? And if there's a quiz due date, it's your job and your responsibility to meet that obligation. When I have a quiz, I leave the window of access open for 12 to 15 hours, sometimes longer, okay? I usually open a quiz during the class period on the day that it becomes due, and I'll leave that quiz open until the following day, either 24 hours later, 12 hours later, or the following day at midnight, okay? You've got a huge window of opportunity to access that quiz for 30 minutes and answer 20 to 25 questions. That's not asking too much. That's not too hard. It's not an unrealistic expectation. And if you sleep through it or forget about it, or for some reason, unless there's a glitch that is clearly the responsibility of Webcourses and the college, okay? In other words, if it's a glitch at your end because you didn't pay your cable bill and your internet got shut off, that's not a reason to be allowed access to the quiz after the due date expires. These are your responsibilities. These are very simple. 6 times in 15 weeks, you got to access the internet for 30 minutes and answer a few short questions, okay? I don't think it's too unreasonable. And unless there are some very serious and legitimate reasons why you need to have access to a quiz after a deadline expires, the answer will be no, okay? But if you have extenuating circumstances, you should come and talk to me, either come to my office hours or send me an email, okay? I don't want you to suffer because of situations or circumstances that are beyond your control, okay? I'm not an unreasonable person in that respect, but sleeping through it, forgetting about it, the dog ate your homework, your laptop died, or your internet was out at your house, none of those are acceptable reasons, okay? The same goes for your final exam, even more so for the final exam. If you don't hit that window, that's it, because the semester closes, the school shuts down, and everything goes to bed for the holiday. So if you haven't met your objectives, okay, of your final exam, that's all on you, okay? The date for the final exam will be published at the beginning of the curriculum. That due date will be looming in your future for 15 weeks, and the closer we get to it, the more I'll remind you about it, okay? It's usually 60 questions, multiple choice. It's open for, I don't know, an hour and a half, timed hour and a half, and your window is like 24 hours to take it. So, again, it's just like the quizzes. It's simple. It's not a big deal. Just don't forget about it, okay? If you miss attendance in one particular class, it's probably not going to affect your grade terribly at all. If you miss a handful of classes, that might start having an effect on your overall grade, okay? If you don't come to class, you don't get credit for that day, okay? Now again, if you have extenuating circumstances, that's something we can talk about. If you just didn't want to come to class that day, you don't get credit. If you forgot to come to class, you don't get credit. If you overslept, you don't get credit, okay? You have to come to class to get the credit. Now, if you got an ROTC commitment, or if you're hospitalized, or if somebody in your immediate family who is an integral part of your care or your growth or your college experience, will work around it, okay? So I understand that life happens. I want to work with you for legitimate reasons, but forgetting, oversleeping, the alarm didn't go off, too tired to come in, had a hangover, none of that qualifies as forgiveness for missing class, okay? I don't have any extra credit, although sometimes I use outside assignments as optional credit for maybe a really bad quiz that you bombed. For instance, I frequently exchange good performance on the exposure assignment for a bad grade on a quiz. That's something that I treat with a case-by-case basis. Come to me and talk to me about it. We can discuss your situation and we can come to, I think, a solution that works best for everybody, okay? I would like to see you take notes in this class. The reason why is because it's a creative medium where we work with our hands. And so everything that we do that involves our hands translates some measure of creativity from the work to our brains, to our heart, okay? And I firmly believe that if you're taking effective notes in class, that the concepts and the ideas will transcend your written pages and they will become a functional part of your creative brain, okay? There is something that happens when we write things down, okay? I'm not telling you to take extensive notes. I'm not telling you to take shorthand and record every word that I say, but I do offer some videos on Webcourses from the Harvard School Online, some recommendations on how to take good notes, some other types of grammar and written proficiency resources that I'll offer to you. Take notes, okay? I take notes to this day, okay? As a working professional working on Hollywood films, you can bet your bottom dollar that I was taking notes anytime I went on a tech scout, anytime I had a meeting with my boss, okay? Anytime that I was put in responsibility for large volumes of things that needed to get done, I was writing those things down, because if you miss a detail and forget something, it can cost a lot of money exponentially to the producers and the studios that you're working for. And if you develop a reputation for not fulfilling your responsibilities, that affects how often you're going to work. So taking notes, there's no shame in it. You're not a nerd if you do. You're not less of a creative technician if you do. Taking notes is just an honest, proactive way of making sure you don't forget about important details, okay? If you take notes on your laptop, please let me know that that's the style and the method that you like to work with. I get really concerned when I see a lot of electronic devices getting produced in class, because I have this notion in my head that some of the folks that are with their laptops open or that are looking at their cell phones are really on YouTube, or they're really on eBay, or they're really on Amazon, or they're really on their email website, and they're not listening to the lecture, okay? If those types of things are important to you, do it outside of class. Don't come in class with your devices and go online and start watching videos, okay? When we're in class together, that's our time to bond. It's our time to share information. It's my time to assess your growth, right? To share my knowledge with you. And I want your attention for those 2.5 or however many hours we're together, okay? And then beyond that, you can access anything else about this course at your leisure on Webcourses, okay? But for the couple of hours we're together on campus face-to-face, I want there to be an unbroken link between our communication, okay? So don't come to class and then go on Amazon, okay, or go on YouTube, okay? I may ask you to leave. If that happens too much, you may be asked to repeat the class and be given an incomplete, okay? I'm very serious about the unauthorized use of electronic devices in class. It's a subject that's very important to me, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page regarding that policy, okay? So please, if you come to class, if you're taking notes on your laptop, or if you're taking notes that are for the accessibility office, for student services or whatever, just let me know, okay? So that I don't get an idea in my head that you're not listening and not paying attention, okay? All right, here's your textbook. This is the blue-brown book, okay? Blaine Brown, Cinematography Theory and Practice for Cinematographers and Directors. Okay, not only cinematographers are taking this class. Directors need to know this information. Production designers need to know this information. Lighting supervisors like gaffers, key grips, any of those individuals working on a movie need to know the concepts of cinematography, because they are hinging on and part and parcel to your own responsibilities in your particular departments and disciplines, okay? So this cinematography that's happening, yes, it's inspired and it is supervised by one individual, but it is really a collaboration of a number of individuals from the grip department, the lighting department, the camera department, the art department, and so on, okay? So the cinematography becomes ours, all right? So you all have a part to play in it. You can all apply the concepts in your own creative disciplines, whether you're in the wardrobe department, hair and makeup department. It doesn't really matter. Cinematography touches every one of the disciplines on set. And so every department is going to, at some point or another, interact directly or indirectly with the cinematography. Okay? That's a very important thing to remember. Even the editors have to talk to the cinematographers from time to time. Okay. The Blaine Brown book covers a bunch of theories: visual language, visual storytelling, continuity, cameras and sensors, exposure, color, exposure control tools, image control through post-production grading, camera movement, and so forth. So there's a number of topics that are in here. We're not going to read the entire textbook. There's a few chapters that I don't touch on in Cinematography 1. I leave those for Cinematography 2. And the chapters really aren't that long, so they're not too taxing to read. At the most, they might be 30 pages. And most of it is about half of that, okay, 12 to 15 pages. If you want to go to the UCF library, the page where you can access the Brown version or the second edition, it's going to look like this. It's going to have a little icon. You can click on this. It'll offer you a download button as a PDF. And then you can access that through the library's website. Here is the actual page with the download button, right? And it's the second edition. It's the July 18th, 2011 first published copy. It's 400 pages, and this is the ISBN number, okay? So you can access it through the school library. It won't cost you anything. I would recommend that you buy the blue version, the third edition, because there's several new parts that pertain specifically to digital capture and digital cameras, and this is mostly still regarding the film standard as the principal mode of capture. And so there's a few aspects in this book that are missing, like digital cameras, capture devices, files, media, and so forth. That's all in the third edition. Okay. There are a couple of extra resources that I like to work from, particularly Cinematography by Dave Stump, ASC. Dave Stump is an amazing digital post-production cinematographer. So he does digital elements, and he does green screens, and he does optical printing, and a lot of things that are really important to our process, but that are really technical and that sometimes in many cases you haven't actually heard of. But Dave Stump, he's a good guy. He's part of the American Society of Cinematographers, and there's a couple of chapters in his book that I do reference, and when I do, I'll give you the PDF of those chapters. So you don't have to go out and buy this particular text. This one's expensive. And so I don't ask you to be responsible for buying it. I'll provide you anything out of that volume that you need to know. Here is advice on how to get into the industry. This is from Cook Optics TV. A lot of the videos that I'm going to offer you this semester will be from Cook Optics TV. And they are a lens manufacturer from the United Kingdom. They started off as Taylor and Hobson in the 1800s. And aside from buying their optical blanks from France, they ground their own lenses, coated their own lenses, and barreled or housed their lenses under the Taylor Hobson and later the Cook Optics label. They're still in production today. Cook has a wonderful line of i7 lenses that just came out for digital cameras and digital capture. The Cook S4 series is a prolific and legendary set of lenses that have been around for a number of years now, and they just had a resurgence in one of their original cinematic lens lines that have been updated for digital capture and digital technology in modern filmmaking conditions. The classic line of cinema primes from Cook Optics is available now. So their tools are out there in the world. Lots of professionals are using them. Roger Deakins loves Cook Optics. He owns, I think he uses the S4s on occasion. Shane Hurlbut, ASC, who you guys might know from his website and his Hurlbut Academy. He's a big proponent of the Cook Optics, the cinema lenses. I love the cinema lenses offered by Cooks. They're a little bit out of my price bracket, unfortunately. But I love the Cook look, as it's called, as well. And the neat thing that Cook has done in recent years that I think is a really a great sign of their dedication and commitment to the industry and to new filmmakers who are coming up through the ranks is they've created this Cook Optics TV website. And so I approached Cook Optics last year and I asked them for permission to show their educational videos in our classes. And they gave me written permission to do so. They welcomed us into their family. And so they're very excited to know that their videos and their products are being mentioned and portrayed in the film program here at UCF. So we have their permission and we have their good graces to use all of their films. And so I access a lot of their videos because they cover some really great topics. They interview industry professionals with real bona fide credits, guys who have shot movies that we've all gone and bought tickets to go see in the theater. And they'll interview these folks and they'll ask them pertinent questions and they'll talk to them about concepts and ask them to explain aspects of cinematography in ways that are very educational, very informative. And it's a way for us to get to meet, at least through the medium of video, meet the movers and the shakers that are contemporaries in our industry. Okay, I'm a big proponent of going out and asking real professionals questions about craft. Okay, you'll never get an answer from me that came strictly from a book or strictly from a Google website. Okay, my courses are constructed via my experience and my perception and my understanding of the industry based on my experience. And my experience is the virtue of working with dozens and dozens of notable professionals over the years, some guys with Academy Awards, that have taught me everything that I know. So when I'm passing it on to you, it's passing the torch from one generation to the next. Okay, and that involves fraternity, it involves mentorship, and it involves experience. Okay, so everything that I'm telling you is based on my experience. If I tell you a certain thing doesn't work or one light's better than the other for this kind of technique, it's probably because I've done it 100 or more times on a movie set somewhere in the industry at some point in time. Okay, I am both a student and a practitioner of the craft of filmmaking. okay? So I'm an interesting blend of the two points of view, okay? So use me as a resource, okay? That's why I say pay attention in class, take notes. I'm going to throw stories out at you and pieces of information that sometimes it's off the cuff and it's spontaneous based on a question that I get from somebody in the classroom, okay? And it might not be in the lecture materials, or it might not be in the deck because somebody at some point in time asked a pertinent question in class that I hadn't thought to mention. And so I'll give you it in real time, right then and there. If you're present, paying attention and taking notes, you won't miss those moments. Here again is another video that I think you'll enjoy. What's the hardest thing about your job? So again, Cook Optics went out to a trade show somewhere, got a bunch of cinematographers with some bona fide credits and asked them, what are the hardest things about your job? And so there's a number of guys whose names you might recognize in this little film. It's short, it's not terribly long, but some of the answers might surprise you and you might find them very interesting. Quick overview of the camera department, and then we're done here. Okay, so the camera department consists of a number of individuals. The head of the department is the cinematographer, okay? The cinematographer is the director of photography. The director of photography works hand in hand with the director. So the director, if you can think of the director of the film as the performance portion of the project and the cinematographer as the visual portion of the project, those two are two halves of the same mind, okay? And so they're both working in the same direction towards the same objective, one visually and one lyrically or through performance, okay? The cinematographer or the director of photography, he's sometimes also his own camera operator. This is Roger Deakins. He likes to operate his own camera, but Roger also likes to have an additional camera operator on set. That person might be a Steadicam operator. That person might also be the handheld camera operator or the B camera operator, okay? And then Roger likes to get on one of those cameras himself. He's one of those cinematographers that feels that if he's not lensing the moment, that he's missing some of the information or some of the feeling, and he doesn't get a full or true sense of what he's created unless he has seen it through the lens. I understand, because coming from a film background and not a digital background, once upon a time we had no choice but to look through the viewfinder of the camera if we wanted to know what was actually being committed to film. So it harkens back to that analog day. But taking those sensibilities and carrying them forward is what makes Roger Deakins such an effective DP. And for 2 out of the last 4 years, I believe it was, 3 years, he's been the Oscar winner for cinematography. Blade Runner 2049, and he did it again this year for 2017, okay, the movie about World War I. 2017? No, 1917. Sorry, I jumped 100 years. 1917, okay. Best cinematography in each of those years, okay? So he's a 2-time winner. He's been at this for a very long time. I've met him several times out in Los Angeles. He used to be the cinematographer in residence at UCLA, which is where I first met him. And then he's very proactive at the American Society of Cinematographers, where they hold open houses and guild discussions and symposiums several times a year, and he's usually one of the attendees. The man to his left, that's Andy Harris. Andy Harris is the focus puller, okay? So I kind of skipped over the operator. The camera operator, if the DP is not going to operate the camera, then he's going to use the camera operator. But in some cases, this person is also the Steadicam operator, or in this case, this happens to be Emmanuel Lebetsky. He's the cinematographer and a camera operator. Next in line is the focus puller, or the first AC. So if I go back to this shot, this is Andy Harris right here. So Andy Harris has been with Roger for as long as I've been in the business. I worked with Andy Harris when I was very young as a second assistant cameraman, and he was starting to work with Roger in those days. My career lasts 30 years. That means Andy's been with Roger now for at least 30 years. Every time there's been a major motion picture where Roger's been at the helm, Andy was by his side pulling focus and taking care of the cameras as the first assistant cameraman. Okay, so these relationships that you start early in your career could last a lifetime. Here's another first AC at work. This is Larry Nielsen. He's helping to set up a hothead on a crane, and he's setting up the wireless focus assist so he can be next to the DP's monitor or the director's monitor and pulling focus remotely with a radio-controlled focus assist. The first AC is also called the focus puller for that reason. Their primary responsibility on set is to build the camera, have the camera put in whatever mode it needs, whatever mode the DP needs to function, and then to effectively pull or follow the focus on every shot to make sure that everything comes out sharp. The second AC, then, further down the hierarchy, is working for the first assistant cameraman, and one of their primary duties is to make sure that the head of every clip or every take of film is labeled so that the editors can find that film and track it in post-production. So until we had the virtue of metadata on files that came out of a digital video camera, everything was visually referenced using the slate, okay? And here's a slate right here. You put your roll number or your card number, the scene number here, the number of takes in the scene. You list the producer, the director's name, the cinematographer's name, whether it's A camera, B camera, etc. Whether you were 24 frames per second or whether you were off speed in some mode, the date that you took this material, whether you were interior or exterior, day or night, sync sound or without sound, okay? And then usually there's a camera report on the back, and you have a pair of sticks so you can do a manual sync point to help the editors line up your audio and your visual content in post-production so they can start chopping it up into a movie. This is a really important job, okay? Even in the age of digital, labeling all of our content so that the editors can find the clip that they need, the close-up shot that they need, the third or the fourth or the fifth take of the scene where the actor puts the thing down on the table, and it's very important. The editors are going to be looking and sifting through hundreds of thousands of feet of footage, if not millions of feet of footage at the end of a major feature film. And so labeling and cataloging everything that's shot is a huge, huge deal. Okay, and the second AC is square in the center of that responsibility. Beyond that, we have the loader, or the second AC. In the film world, if you're still shooting film, so if you're still working with Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, or you're still working with, Wally Pfister's directing now, and he still likes to shoot film. There's a number of folks that are still out there using the analog medium of film. And so if you're working on a job like that, you will have a loader, and the loader's job is to put the fresh film in a mag, have that mag shot out on film through the camera, and then they take that spent mag back to the camera department, the camera truck, or the dark room, and they download that film into light tight canisters that are then shipped to the lab, and are photochemically developed. And so then they create the negative. The negatives are then scanned by Northlight scanners, turned into digital files, brought into the digital intermediate, given a one light pass so the editors have an image they can look at that's properly exposed, and they cut the film, and then they conform the digital resources to the edited piece in negative. So there's still loaders out there. It's a good job if you can get it. You'll touch every inch of the movie from this position, from this point of view. It's a huge responsibility, and ironically, it's often given to the least experienced guy on the crew. I was only 19, 20 years old when I started loading magazines for major feature productions, okay? Go figure, right? The youngest guy with the least amount of experience is given the hard work in film form of 60 to 100 people on set, and then asked to go and deal with that film, package it up in total darkness, send it to the lab without fogging or overexposing or flashing the film and ruining everybody's hard work. It's an interesting turn of responsibility. Nevertheless, here is a camera loader. Like I said, it's a great job. It's how I started in the camera department 30 years ago. The digital imaging technician, that's a new animal on set these days. There didn't used to be a DIT in the old days. In the old days, this position was just the video assist operator, and basically a film camera might have a beam splitter in it where you could take an optical path out of line with the lens and the film and divert some of that image to a video camera module that was integrated into the film camera, and that signal was sent through a cable to a video monitor on set, and that gave the director some sense of what the recorded image was going to look like, although it wasn't the same image that was being committed to film, because it was through a beam splitter to a totally different camera with a totally different capture device that had different sensitivity, different dynamic range. Sometimes they were only black and white. But it was a way for us to see the image as closely as possible to what was being rendered through the film camera once upon a time. Now, the digital cameras, you can divert that signal in as many different directions as you want, as long as there's I/O for it on the camera. And some of it goes to the recording medium, some of it goes to an external monitor, some of it might go to an external recorder, some of it might go to a remote radio transceiver that sends signal to the focus puller's monitor over in a chair, or the DIT's cart over behind the director's monitor. So digital has offered us all these wonderful avenues of possibility and sharing and manipulating of the captured image, to where we're now so heavily invested in digital that we're going to see less and less original film origination here moving forward in the future. But the DIT is on the set. He's responsible for taking some signal from the camera, specifically if you're shooting a flat profile image and recording that to your recording media. The DIT will take the flat image with the wide flat dynamic range and apply a lookup table, which is a set of color correction tools and things that will mimic or reflect what the colorist is going to do to those files in post-production. And he'll overlay that digital information onto a portion of the flat file and show you a color-corrected and exposure-corrected look on a special monitor on set. And then he pipes that signal to the director and probably the cinematographer as well, so that instead of sitting there looking at a flat, low-contrast raw file, which generally is very disconcerting because it's muddy-looking and very difficult to see detail, and they're applying what will be the color correction and exposure correction tool sets to one of the signals, and you can see your finished image or what it will look like in real time, which is a nice way to work. And then he's also checking the signal coming out of the camera. He's adjusting, in some cases, the exposure for the digital camera at his cart with the direction of the DP. And then he is doing his own recordings of this material as safe backups, as copies for the producers, copies for the PR department, copies for the archive, a number of different copies that different departments and individuals might need or request during the course of filming, and the DIT is providing that service to those departments. Okay, so he's now an integral part of the camera department that is only maybe 5, maybe 10 years old at this point, but I doubt, 5 to 8 years, I'm thinking, is how recent this crew position has been created in an industry that is now over 100 years old. This is the most recent addition to the film making community that we have. It's evidence of the digital new millennium that we're in now. Steadicam op is, in these days and times, quite often also the B camera operator. It's a specialized piece of gear. It's a camera stabilization device that's worn on the body of the operator, and it gives you those smooth, glassy moves with the camera that we love so much. Okay, so Steadicam operator is also probably the B camera operator. The camera production assistant, this is an individual who wants to learn the craft of camera, has probably been recruited through the Camera Guild, or through the camera assistance branch of the IATSE, or he might be the producer's nephew, okay? At any rate, the individual who is selected as the camera department production assistant is somebody who honestly wants to be involved in the camera family at some point, and so this is the entry-level job, okay? This is the step and fetch guy, the coffee guy, the run to the cleaners and pick up my laundry guy, the run to Panavision and pick up the expendable supply order guy, okay? An individual who will do whatever's asked of him on the set or her while they're learning the ropes, okay? So this is a very much an entry-level position, but it's a great place to be because the view from these seats is impeccable. You get to see every aspect of how the camera department works and functions and how the people get along and how they interact with each other, more so than anybody else because you're right there with them every day. Okay, so this fellow here is Matt Workman. He is a young up-and-coming cinematographer, works out of the New York market. He has a website called Cinematography Database, and he has developed some really interesting software that allows us to create a 3D virtual model of a film set where we can add lighting and cameras and dolly tracks and cranes and sets, okay? And then we can spin and evaluate and look at this in 3D space, kind of like CAD drawing, but on steroids, right? Because it's got all these custom elements and icons that can be loaded into the program that are film cameras and film dollies and cranes and the tools that we routinely work with on a day-to-day basis. And you can play with them and create virtual setups in virtual space using his software. So he's a pretty interesting guy. You can check out his video. It's also embedded in Webcourses, and he talks about the positions in the camera department, the hierarchy, who they are, what their positions are called, and how they fit into the scheme of things on a film set. So check that out. It's about, about 10 minutes long maybe, and it's in your assets, in your embedded assets on Webcourses. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is leave you with this thought. This is from Blaine Brown's Cinematography Theory and Practice text. And in it, he says, sort of as an aside or as a parting thought, he says, cinema is a language, and within it are the specific vocabularies and sub-languages of the lens, composition, visual design, lighting, image control, continuity, movement, and point of view. Learning these languages and vocabularies is a never-ending and fascinating lifelong study. As with any language, you can use it to compose clear and informative prose or create visual poetry. And that's a quote directly from the author of your textbook, okay? I happen to agree with him. Cinematography has its own lexicon, its own vocabulary. It is a language in and of itself. It's the language of visual communication, okay? And you can spend your whole life perfecting the craft, okay? I got my first 35 millimeter film camera when I was 12 years old, okay? My education began in 1978. My initial inspiration, Star Wars, E.T., the extraterrestrial. Maybe more so than Star Wars, E.T., the extraterrestrial. Or I'm sorry, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Okay? Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think, more than any other film, was responsible for my film career. Okay? It just resonated with me, the right place at the right time. I really liked Star Wars. Star Wars was a little bit out there, and the concept was really, really new. And I happened to be really into astronomy, and I was really into the concept of aliens and extraterrestrials. So when Close Encounters came, man, I was open for business, okay? So that film, Star Wars, E.T., those films really deeply resonate with me. I've met Alan Davio, the DP from E.T. the Extraterrestrial. We've had several very heartwarming conversations. He's a huge inspiration for me. And so without these films and without these people, okay, I probably wouldn't have had the career that I had. And as a benefit of their nurture and their generosity, I now offer my experience to you, my students. Okay, so welcome to Cinematography 1. Please don't forget to submit your financial aid assignment. That's critical to make sure that you get your FAFSA allowance, whatever that is. Okay, if you don't do it, it might delay your disbursements. Don't forget your homework assignment. Your first reading assignment is from the Brown book. It's the chapter on set operations, and it's just going to reiterate some of the things that I have shared with you today about the positions in the camera department, who the people are, what their responsibilities are, and so forth. Okay, so welcome to class. I look forward to working with you this semester. We're going to meet each week for just under 3 hours. If you give me your attention for those brief periods of time throughout the semester, I promise you at the end of the semester you will have a working knowledge of cinematography, and you will be more aware and in a better position to create more effective films as a result. Okay, cinematography is critical to the process, and I would seek to share that process with you. So thanks for your attention and your time, and I'll see you next week.